47 Christian colleges have closed or merged in the past decade. 47 institutions that survived world wars, economic depressions, and every cultural shift of the 20th century couldn't survive the 21st. Schools that educated generations of pastors, missionaries, teachers, and Christian leaders are gone. Buildings that once housed hundreds of students now sit empty or sold to developers. Traditions that lasted over a century ended in bankruptcy court. A professor at a small Christian college in the Midwest sent me an email last year. She'd taught there for 19 years, loved her students, believed in the mission, and thought the school would last forever. Then came the emergency faculty meeting. The president stood before them with numbers they'd never seen before. Enrollment was down 42% from 5 years ago. The endowment was nearly depleted. They'd been borrowing to cover operating expenses for 3 years. The financial situation was unsustainable. The board had voted to close the college at the end of the academic year. She said the room went silent. Some faculty cried. Others looked stunned. They'd all known enrollment was declining, but they didn't realize how dire things were. Within months, she'd be unemployed. Her students would have to transfer. The institution she'd given nearly 2 decades of her life to would cease to exist. She said it felt like watching a family member die slowly, knowing you couldn't save them. Multiply that scene across Christian higher education. Dozens of colleges announcing closures. Hundreds more operating in financial crisis. Thousands of faculty losing jobs. Tens of thousands of students scrambling to find new schools. And millions of alumni watching their alma maters disappear. This isn't a few struggling schools. This is a systemic collapse of an entire sector of American Christianity. Today, we're investigating the Christian college crisis. Why institutions that survived for over a century are closing at record rates. What changed in American Christianity and American culture that made these schools unsustainable? Who's most affected and what's being lost? And what this reveals about the future of Christian education and evangelical Christianity itself. If you want to understand one of the most consequential institutional crises in modern American Christianity, subscribe now. Because the Christian college collapse isn't just about education. It's about the unraveling of the infrastructure that sustained evangelical culture for generations. To understand how catastrophic this is, you need to see the pattern. These aren't just small, unknown schools. These are institutions with long histories, established reputations, and loyal alumni bases. Sweetbriar College, founded in 1901, announced closure in 2015 before alumni saved it at the last minute. Tennessee Temple University, which trained thousands of pastors and missionaries, closed in 2015 after 83 years. Virginia Intermont College closed after 117 years. Mount Ida College, which had operated since 1899, closed abruptly in 2018, leaving students scrambling mid-semester. The closures accelerated after 2015. Schools that had weathered every previous economic crisis suddenly couldn't survive. Some closed completely. Others merged with larger institutions, losing their independent identity. Still others converted to online-only programs, abandoning their residential campus model entirely. The Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which represents over 180 Christian institutions, reports that member schools are facing unprecedented financial pressure. Enrollment declines, tuition dependency, rising operational costs, declining donations, aging facilities needing expensive repairs. The perfect storm of challenges. Here's what makes this particularly devastating. Christian colleges weren't peripheral institutions. They were central to evangelical culture. They educated pastors who led churches, missionaries who served globally, teachers who shaped Christian schools, business leaders who built Christian organizations, artists, writers, musicians, counselors, and professionals who carried Christian values into every field. They created networks that sustained evangelical culture. Alumni who married each other, hired each other, supported each other. The collapse of Christian colleges isn't just about education. It's about the dismantling of the institutional infrastructure of American evangelicalism. Behind the statistics are real people experiencing devastating loss. Professor Michael taught theology at a Christian college in Pennsylvania for 27 years. He loved teaching, mentored hundreds of students, and published books through his work there. When the college announced closure, he was 61 years old. Too young to retire, too old to easily find another teaching position. He applied to dozens of schools. Most weren't hiring. Some said he was overqualified. Others couldn't afford his salary expectations. He ended up taking a part-time position at a community college teaching remedial writing, a job that had nothing to do with his expertise or calling. He told me it felt like his career ended prematurely, and the work he'd devoted his life to no longer mattered. Student Sarah was a junior when her Christian college announced it was closing. She'd chosen the school specifically for its biblical studies program and close-knit community. She'd made lifelong friends, found mentors, and was thriving academically. Suddenly, she had to find a new school mid-degree. Most of her credits wouldn't transfer. She'd have to start over in many classes. The financial aid package she'd had wouldn't apply elsewhere. She ended up at a state university where she felt lost and isolated. She said the school closing didn't just disrupt her education, it destroyed the community that had become her home. Alumni David graduated from a Christian college in 1987. He met his wife there. His children attended there. He'd donated faithfully for 30 years. When the school closed, he felt like he'd lost part of his identity. The place that shaped his faith, his career, his family no longer existed. He drove past the empty campus once and said it was like visiting a gravesite. All the memories were there, but the life was gone. This is the human cost of the Christian college crisis. Not just institutional failure, but broken communities, lost livelihoods, and shattered dreams. Subscribe now if you're starting to grasp the scale of this tragedy, because we need to understand what caused it. The primary cause of Christian college closures is simple: not enough students. Enrollment at Christian colleges has declined dramatically over the past 15 years. Schools that had 2,000 students in 2008 now have 800. Schools that were financially stable with full dorms now operate half-empty with budget deficits. The reasons for enrollment decline are complex. First, the overall number of high school graduates who go to college has declined. More students are choosing community colleges, trade schools, or going directly into the workforce. The 4-year residential college model that Christian schools depend on is less appealing to Gen Z. Second, Christian colleges are expensive. Most charge $30,000 to $50,000 per year for tuition, room, and board. Students graduate with massive debt. Many families can't afford it or won't pay it when state universities cost half as much. Third, the number of evangelical families choosing Christian colleges has declined. Even committed Christian families are sending their kids to state schools or secular private universities. The cultural assumption that Christian kids should go to Christian colleges has weakened dramatically. Fourth, Christian colleges struggle to attract non-Christian students. Most of their marketing targets evangelical families. They require chapel attendance, enforce behavioral codes, require Bible classes. This appeals to a narrow demographic. When that demographic shrinks or chooses other options, Christian colleges have no backup plan. They're too Christian to attract secular students, but not compelling enough to attract the Christian students they're designed for. Fifth, competition increased. Online education exploded. For-profit Christian universities like Liberty and Grand Canyon grew massive through online programs. Students can now get Christian education remotely without paying for a residential campus experience. Traditional Christian colleges can't compete. The enrollment collapse created a death spiral. Fewer students means less tuition revenue. Less revenue means cutting programs and staff. Cutting programs makes the school less attractive. Being less attractive means even fewer students enroll. The spiral accelerates until the school can't sustain operations. For many Christian colleges, the enrollment decline happened so fast they couldn't adapt quickly enough to survive. Christian colleges operate on a financial model that's fundamentally unsustainable in the current environment. Most are tuition dependent, meaning 70 to 90% of their revenue comes from student tuition and fees. They have small endowments compared to elite universities. They don't have major research grants. They don't have wealthy donors giving tens of millions. They survive year to year based on enrollment. When enrollment drops, there's no financial cushion. Schools go from stable to crisis in just a few years. The cost structure is the problem. Christian colleges have expensive fixed costs, campus buildings that need maintenance, tenured faculty with guaranteed salaries, administrative staff, athletic programs, chapel programs, residence life. All of this costs money regardless of how many students enroll. To maintain quality with declining enrollment, schools would need to raise tuition dramatically. But tuition is already too high. Raising it further drives away more students. They're trapped. They can't cut costs fast enough without destroying what makes them attractive. They can't raise prices without losing more students. Many Christian colleges tried to survive by going into debt. They borrowed to cover operating deficits. They deferred maintenance. They spent endowment principal. They made risky financial decisions hoping enrollment would recover. When it didn't, they dug themselves into holes they couldn't escape. Some schools borrowed so much that debt service consumed 20 to 30% of their budget. They were paying banks instead of faculty. The financial model that worked for decades when enrollment was stable and growing completely failed when enrollment declined. Beyond financial problems, many Christian colleges faced identity crises that accelerated their decline. They drifted from their founding missions. Schools founded to train pastors and missionaries became generic liberal arts colleges that happened to be Christian. The distinctive Christian identity weakened. Chapel became optional. Bible classes became generic religious studies. Behavioral codes relaxed. Hiring didn't prioritize Christian commitment. The schools became less explicitly Christian to appeal to broader audiences. This backfired catastrophically. They lost their core constituency, committed evangelical families who wanted distinctly Christian education, without gaining the secular students they hoped to attract. They ended up in no man's land. Not Christian enough for evangelicals. Not secular enough for non-Christians. Nobody's first choice. Mission drift also affected faculty and culture. Older faculty who joined when the school was robustly Christian watched it become something different. They felt betrayed. Some left. Others stayed but became disillusioned. The institutional culture weakened. Schools that maintained strong Christian identity actually fared better. Places like Grove City College, Hillsdale College, and Patrick Henry College stayed robustly Christian and conservative. Their enrollment remained stable or grew because they clearly knew what they were and didn't apologize for it. They attracted students specifically because of their strong identity. The lesson is clear. In a competitive market, being clearly something is better than trying to be everything. Christian colleges that compromised their identity to attract more students lost both the students they had and failed to gain the students they wanted. The deeper cause of Christian college collapse is cultural shift within American evangelicalism. The assumption that shaped Christian higher education for generations no longer holds. That assumption was that Christian young people needed Christian environments to develop faith, find Christian spouses, and prepare for Christian service. Christian colleges existed to provide that environment. But that assumption has weakened dramatically. Many evangelical parents no longer believe Christian colleges are necessary or even beneficial. Some think their kids need to be in secular environments to develop resilient faith. Others think Christian colleges are too sheltered and don't prepare students for the real world. Still others have become disillusioned with evangelical institutions generally and don't want to send their kids to schools they see as theologically or politically problematic. The rise of non-denominational evangelicalism also hurt Christian colleges. Older denominational schools like Baptist, Methodist, or Presbyterian colleges could rely on their denominations to send students. Non-denominational evangelicals have no such loyalty. They choose schools based on cost, reputation, and programs, not religious affiliation. The scandal and dysfunction in evangelical leadership also damaged Christian colleges. High-profile moral failures, political controversies, and toxic church cultures made some families question whether Christian institutions are actually healthier than secular ones. Why pay more for Christian education when Christian leaders keep failing spectacularly? The cultural changes happened faster than Christian colleges could adapt. They were built for a world where evangelical families automatically chose Christian schools. That world doesn't exist anymore, and schools couldn't reinvent themselves quickly enough to survive in the new reality. Subscribe now if you're understanding the multiple failures that created this crisis, because we need to examine what's being lost and what it means for the future. When Christian colleges close, we lose something significant. These weren't perfect institutions. Many had real problems, but they offered something valuable that's hard to replace. They integrated faith and learning in ways secular universities don't. Students could study biology or literature or history while explicitly engaging with how Christian faith relates to those fields. They didn't have to compartmentalize their faith. They could bring their whole selves to their education. Christian colleges also offered mentorship from faculty who shared students' faith commitments. Professors who could speak into students' spiritual formation, not just their academic development. Who could model what it looks like to be a Christian scholar, a Christian professional, a Christian adult. For many students, especially those from non-Christian homes or weak church backgrounds, Christian college faculty became the most important spiritual influences in their lives. When these schools close, where do students find that mentorship? Christian colleges also created communities where students could develop faith alongside peers, where they could ask hard questions in safe environments, where they could work through doubts with people who cared about them, where lifelong friendships and often marriages formed. These communities shaped thousands of young people in ways that had ripple effects for decades. The loss of Christian colleges means the loss of these formative communities. Students can still go to church in college. They can join campus ministries, but it's not the same as living in an environment where faith is woven into everything. Something valuable is being lost that we may not fully appreciate until it's gone. Beyond individual education, Christian colleges created networks that sustained evangelical culture. Alumni networks that connected graduates across the country and around the world. When you graduated from Wheaton or Calvin or Biola, you had instant connections with thousands of other alumni. You could find jobs through alumni networks. You could find churches through alumni. You could find community wherever you moved. These networks had enormous practical value. Christian colleges also created institutional networks. Churches looked to Christian colleges to supply pastors. Mission organizations recruited from Christian colleges. Christian schools hired teachers from Christian colleges. Christian nonprofits found staff through Christian colleges. When Christian colleges close, these pipeline relationships break down. Churches struggle to find trained pastors. Mission organizations struggle to find qualified candidates. Christian institutions struggle to find employees who share their values and commitments. The network effects also created cultural continuity. Christian colleges passed down traditions, values, and practices from one generation to the next. They preserved theological knowledge. They maintained standards for ministry. They created shared culture that connected evangelicals across denominations and regions. When Christian colleges close, this cultural transmission weakens. Each generation has to rebuild from scratch rather than building on what previous generations established. The long-term consequences may be more significant than the immediate educational loss. The Christian college crisis is creating unintended consequences that we're only beginning to see. First, pastoral education is in crisis. Most pastors historically were trained at Christian colleges and seminaries. With Christian colleges closing and seminary enrollment declining, who's training the next generation of pastors? Some denominations are lowering educational requirements because they can't find enough trained candidates. This may create long-term problems for church health and theological literacy. Second, Christian intellectual life is weakening. Christian colleges were places where Christian scholars could pursue serious academic work while maintaining faith commitments. With fewer Christian colleges, fewer positions exist for Christian scholars. Many are leaving academia or working in secular universities where they can't integrate faith and scholarship. This brain drain weakens Christian engagement with intellectual culture. Third, geographic distribution is changing. Christian colleges existed in small towns and rural areas across the country. When they close, those communities lose major institutions. The economic impact on small towns is significant. The cultural impact is also significant. Christianity becomes more urban and coastal, less present in Middle America. Fourth, socioeconomic access is affected. Christian colleges, despite their cost, provided pathways to education for working-class evangelical families. They offered financial aid. They recruited from Christian schools and homeschool communities. They served students who might not thrive at large secular universities. When Christian colleges close, some of these students have nowhere to go. The class dynamics of American evangelicalism may shift as educational access changes. These unintended consequences will shape American Christianity for decades. We're only beginning to understand the full impact of the Christian college crisis. Not all Christian colleges are closing. Some are thriving. What separates survivors from casualties? First, size matters. Larger Christian universities with 10,000+ students, strong endowments, and diversified revenue have weathered the storm better. Schools like Wheaton, Calvin, Biola, and Baylor are financially stable. They have resources to adapt. Second, clear identity matters. Schools that are unapologetically Christian, theologically robust, and academically excellent attract students specifically because of their distinctiveness. Schools that watered down their Christian identity to appeal to everyone appealed to no one. Third, innovation matters. Schools that developed online programs, created new majors in growing fields, and adapted to changing student needs survived. Schools that insisted on doing things the way they'd always done them died. Fourth, location matters. Christian colleges in or near major cities have geographic advantages. They can attract commuter students. They can partner with local churches and organizations. They have job markets for graduates. Rural Christian colleges, no matter how good, struggle with geographic isolation. Fifth, denomination matters. Christian colleges with strong denominational backing, financial support from churches, and guaranteed pipeline of students from denominational high schools are more stable. Independent Christian colleges without denominational networks are more vulnerable. The survivors tend to be larger, wealthier, more urban, more clearly Christian, and more innovative. Small, rural, generic, traditional Christian colleges are the most endangered. Many won't survive the next decade. As traditional Christian colleges close, alternatives are emerging. Online Christian education has exploded. Liberty University has over 100,000 online students. Grand Canyon University has over 80,000. Students can get Christian education without leaving home, at a fraction of residential college cost. Classical Christian education is growing rapidly at the K-12 level. Some classical Christian schools are considering adding college programs. Students could get Christian classical education from kindergarten through bachelor's degree at one institution. Apprenticeship models are emerging. Some churches and ministries are creating their own training programs that bypass traditional college entirely. Students learn through mentorship and hands-on ministry rather than classroom education. Hybrid models are developing. Some organizations offer gap-year programs or 2-year intensive discipleship programs. Students get spiritual formation and life skills, then transfer to complete degrees elsewhere. These alternatives challenge the traditional 4-year residential Christian college model. They're often cheaper, more flexible, and sometimes more effective at what Christian colleges claim to do: spiritual formation and preparation for Christian service. The question is whether these alternatives can replace what Christian colleges provided, or whether in gaining affordability and flexibility, we lose depth, community, and intellectual rigor. The answer isn't clear yet. We're in a transition period where the old model is dying, but the new models are still being tested. So what should Christians do in response to the Christian college crisis? For students and families, be realistic about Christian higher education. It's not necessary for faithful Christian life. Many strong Christians never attended Christian college. Going into massive debt for Christian college may not be wise. State universities with good campus ministries can provide excellent education and spiritual community at lower cost. Consider all options. Don't assume Christian college is automatically the right choice. For Christian colleges that remain, be excellent and distinctive. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Be clearly Christian, academically rigorous, and financially sustainable. Serve your mission well rather than chasing growth. For churches, consider investing in alternative models of Christian education and leadership development. Maybe the future isn't sending students away to college but developing them locally. For donors, think strategically. Some Christian colleges are worth saving. Others should be allowed to close gracefully. Don't throw money at failing institutions out of nostalgia. For faculty at closing schools, grieve but move forward. Your work mattered even though the institution didn't survive. The students you taught were impacted. The knowledge you shared lives on. Find new ways to serve. For Christian scholars, find ways to continue integrating faith and learning even outside Christian college contexts. Write, teach, mentor. The work is still needed even if the institutional platforms are changing. The Christian college era is ending. What comes next is being determined now. We have opportunity to shape it wisely or watch passively as circumstances dictate. 47 Christian colleges closed or merged in the past decade. Dozens more are in financial crisis. An entire sector of Christian institutional life is collapsing. Buildings that housed generations of students sit empty. Faculty who devoted their lives to Christian education are unemployed. Students who expected to finish at their chosen schools had to transfer. Alumni watch their alma maters disappear. This isn't just about education. It's about the dismantling of infrastructure that sustained American evangelicalism for over a century. The Christian college crisis reveals deeper problems. Enrollment decline shows that evangelical families no longer automatically choose Christian schools. Financial collapse shows that the business model was unsustainable. Mission drift shows that many schools lost clarity about their purpose. Cultural shift shows that the world Christian colleges were built for no longer exists. Some will mourn the loss. They had transformative experiences at Christian colleges. They want their children and grandchildren to have the same opportunities. Others will say good riddance. They see Christian colleges as expensive, insular, and inadequate for preparing students for contemporary life. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Christian colleges did real good. They also had real problems. Their closing is loss, but also opportunity. Opportunity to reimagine Christian education. Opportunity to create more sustainable, accessible, excellent models. Opportunity to separate what was essential about Christian higher education from what was just tradition. The question isn't whether Christian higher education should exist. It's what form it should take in a world that's radically different from the one that created Christian colleges. If this investigation challenged you, opened your eyes, or helped you think about Christian education differently, subscribe now. Share this with parents, students, faculty, or alumni who need to understand what's happening. The Christian college crisis is one of the most significant institutional collapses in modern American Christianity. How we respond will shape evangelical culture for generations. Will we innovate or stagnate? Will we learn from failure or repeat it? Will we preserve what was valuable while releasing what wasn't? That's the challenge before us. The Christian college era is ending. What we build next will determine whether Christian higher education has a future. That future is being written right now, and we all have a role in writing it.